Thank you. Thanks for coming along. Very pleasant area this, I find, in Melbourne. How great would it be to come to work in this area every day? Lucky people. Young people out the window there on the grass, sunning themselves between their giant thoughts in the library or at university, whatever. A few roughnecks out there dealing pills to them, of course, but you know, you need that to make the world go round with all that studying. Now, I must apologise to you if my talk doesn't go for as long as advertised, but as you may have seen me walk very slowly up here, I've been trying to use up amount of time doing stage business, as they say. And also my voice, you may detect I have had a recent cold or something, and but it's given my voice a very rewarding low register, which is good for talking, which is, I've been doing some readings for my book, but I also am a performing musician and I have to do some shows in a couple of weeks, so I'm hoping in the latter of the week to bring my high register back for the falsetto shrieks and screams that are required in that part of my life. And I was thinking about the future, as I'm going to be talking about. Wouldn't it be great in the future if there was endless talk in what might be newspapers or social networks about the conditioning of musicians and writers' bodies as they attempt their work. As you see in Melbourne, we're bombarded by articles about quads, calves, AC joints, groins, ankles of football players on radio, television, and all the newspapers. Wouldn't that be great to hear about Les Murray's, new diet or something? Because he did write a very good book of poems while in a state which he described as having shit on his kidneys. So, and then when he got over his kidney stones or whatever, he wrote a very different kind of book. So it would have been good if we could have kept up with his physical condition via the, say, 7:15 on the ABC News or something. Now to the Arts Physical Conditioning Report. Anyway, thanks for coming along, and let me say, first of all, I was asked to do this talk many weeks ago and it sounded pretty easy. Then I was asked what I would be talking about, so as to sizzle it forwardly in the Wheeler Centre calendar for forthcoming events. That sounded easy as well. I was at home staring at the computer, being assaulted by a screen of nostalgic sludge on Facebook, and said, my topic will be, will the social networks encourage people to think of the future, the unknown? Then I forgot about it until the deadline approached. I need a burning hot deadline to be threatening me before I spring into action, usually a weakness, I know. My topic was going to be quite rhetorical and answer itself negatively. I'm not a young person have some experience in life, though I like to dispute when I'm charged with being either cynical or ironic or negative. The world I grew up in was ironic. That's how people talked. Red-headed people were called bluey, fat guys were called tiny. Voltaire wrote Candide several centuries ago about a young, hopeful person who goes about in the world thinking he is in the best of all possible worlds, no matter what terrible events happen all around. Candide has been retold, reread, and filmed many times over the last century. It's not new to question the world, but some public commentators still seem to see it as odd if you don't join in the applause for overtly manipulative political operators or their opinionated cheerleaders. Short memories and shorter attention spans. The current alternative national leader, Tony Abbott, in the Republican debate of the late 90s, a debate which was never really decided, only crawled by semantics over whether the head of state would be a president or a governor-general, also whether they would be popularly elected or chosen by the Prime Minister, for instance, as the current one is. Tony Abbott smilingly appealed to people's worst natures by asking, Would you want a head of state to be elected by politicians? Ever since it's been talked of as a given that the public rejected the idea of change. Another thing you may remember is the former alternative head of state, Malcolm Turnbull, was then head of the Republican movement. I'm getting around to my futuristic stuff in a minute. Prone to wandering off topic, I'm sorry. There's also the current political debate over climate change. Among scientists, there's no argument. The conservative media and political parties have made it an argument over science. Science is abused by the media as being wasteful, big government item, and its very nature is that it doesn't give definitive opinions on things, which the media, of course, hates. And in their mania for balanced opinions, they'll have one negative about climate change, given equal weight to thousands in the positive about it. The public is ill-informed by the old-school media. Tony Abbott has again smilingly appealed to people's worst instincts by saying to Green voters, "Why do you want a market-based carbon price when you so distrust markets?" Tony Abbott is an annoying type who does nothing but appeal to people's worst instincts. He's a specialist in dead ends. On whose behalf is he appealing? Giant business, of course, who are also clamouring for nuclear power, a still futurist concept. One of the hopes for people to get information out in this frozen political scene are the new social networks. I am a musician. Musicians have experience in this field. If, for instance, you turn up at a venue and the club owner tells you that the phone has been ringing off the hook all day, you know you will be playing to an empty room. It's one of those things. If people think of doing something, sometimes that's enough. They've done it. Thinking about it. Musicians also put up events on social networks where they used to put up posters in the physical world. Musicians know that if there are hordes of people responding to these online virtual expositions of coming events to them, they have come and gone. They do not turn up in the real world. Australians are fools for new technology, and social networks are the same. MySpace has come and gone. This was the musician's favourite, the player's front. If we were talking of a virtual city, MySpace would be a haunted mansion on the hill. Facebook would be an inner-city modish block of apartments. It replaced MySpace. It was the audience's favourite. The musicians straggled along and tried to set up some space again, but it was pretty hopeless. They were basically homeless drifters on the internet. People talk a lot of jive over Facebook. They're not like they're talking over the back fence through a loudhailer, of course, but that makes it more exciting. Twitter may be the best hope for some sort of activity being affected in the real world. It's a more humble thing, like a small car that drives around the place in a predictable fashion. An ice cream van doesn't carry a lot of shit around with it. Just today, the stream of stuff clattering along behind the cans on a piece of string. But I was going to talk about the future, and would any of this make people think of the future? It's one of those funny things, though. All this amazing digital technology has made the past and the present so accessible it's dizzying. Getting our bearings is difficult. The young will be the ones to find a way through it all. Now, you rarely hear people talk of the future. NASA is over. All the money that the US poured into exploring space, a project that generated so many technological advances that we enjoy every day. MRI machines, scratch-resistant lenses for glasses, developments for automation, medical engineering. Now all that's being poured into weaponry. Still, we have the porn industry, which is another great engine of development in technology. The porn industry invented how to pay securely for things on the internet, for instance. The church is giving us nothing, as usual. Well, perhaps porn in a roundabout way. Guilt, laws, proprietary, driving things underground, etc. You may have read the program, A Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, has been closed in the US this week due to lack of money. They must be giving it to some needy weapons manufacturer. As a musician, you also experience the change in the ways that digital technology has freed the players from the banks, but also freed the audience from the idea of paying for anything. The worst is that everything being available has taken away the value that rarity gave to things. 30 years ago, it was exciting to see that picture of Iggy Pop standing on the hands of the crowd at the Cincinnati Pop Festival of 1968, when the legendary jar of peanut butter appeared out of the crowd. And he is there, standing on a sea of hands, smiling and pasting great handfuls of that stuff on himself and flinging it into the crowd. I mean, I heard about it and I imagined it. Years later, I saw a picture on a record cover. Now it's there on YouTube, the entire performance for anybody to see. It's amazing. I got a CD in the mail just this week from a young fellow asking me to produce him. I am no producer. He said he wanted to sound like Bruce Springsteen's Nebraska, which is a very minimalist record with voice and guitar, or Nick Cave's Boatman's Call, which is a very minimalist piano album. I got back to him saying that those records were all well and good as aberrations in the careers of those artists who had hitherto made thrilling, ferocious, upbeat, loud and exciting slabs of sound which they had thrown at the world like handfuls of peanut butter. In that contextual squall of their own summoning, it was interesting for people to hear, deep within the still reverberating sound of their former actual work, these quieter, more sombre recordings. I said to the young fellow who could access these whole lifetimes in an instant that he had rushed to a part of the story, a small part, and that had these artists put out these discs first, no one would have listened. The future was something he'd already raced to with references gathered from the past. I think we're all stuck, hovering on the spot, and only something big and terrible will shock us out of it. Personally, if the internet was cut off tomorrow, I would be happy. It's only making things cruder and sending people spiralling inwards. It's closing off to the public spaces and to the future. It's a dead end, a kind of hell in the sense of Jean-Paul Sartre. It's a space where people can experiment with identity and selves to their heart's content without ever really spilling any blood. Yes, Australians are mad for technology and gadgets. I'm talking about many things from the perspective of a musician. Something is missing in the music world, really. A large elephant in the room, and that's just radio. It's a black hole, an event horizon. Pretty much everything that's recorded flows into and is never heard again. It's an old rusty technology and people source music themselves. From the internet, they can control what they hear and buy what they like. Again, it sounds great, but where's the public space? The big mob is being exposed to something all at once, the happening. Internet radio is dull, it's outside time and space. Yet every dwelling in Australia and every car has a radio. Turn it on and it's white noise with the same oldies playlist 24 hours a day. They say they know what they're doing, but even tradesmen are turning off FM radio. Why is it broken? How did it get to be so hard? Something from the past. The idea of a playlist of songs, like a top 40, was invented in the 1950s in the USA. Prior to that, people thought that the audience would not put up with hearing the same shit over and over. Sometimes you have to look to the past to see the possibilities that once existed that are closed to us now. And Robert Storrs, the man who invented the playlist, said, "I became convinced that people demand their favourites over and over while in the army during the Second World War. I remember vividly what used to happen in restaurants here in the States. The customers would throw their nickels into the jukebox and come up repeatedly with the same tune." So there you go. People thought it was a totally crazy idea. People would hear the same songs over and over. They wouldn't put up with it, was the cry. It went mad all across the world. It was fine while they played new music. In my life, I remember cities in Australia all having several AM radio stations that played new music all day, every day, and the public wanted it. That's an idea from the past that sounds like it's from the future. I'll just have a drink of water here. Chewed up 10 seconds there. While writing this, I got a tweet from the unknown on Twitter. It was a whole Facebook page about unknown things. I was being fingered by the unknown. I put the word future unknown into Twitter and found the page needing to be freshened every couple of minutes. Often the same proverb about the future accredited to unknown, but it was something. There was also a character who tweets into the void as man from the future. I'm following him. I think the man from the future is going to be big. No image at all, just 140 characters transmitted in daily sessions. This way, through such a tight inlet, he can worm his way directly into your brain. Like any hero or cult leader, he pimps us and we believe. I'm already sold on him. I need a voice from the future, outside of the banal, mediocre gridlock so much of the current public discourse hovers within. I will read you here in the real world, as if I was an advance man for a visiting prophet, some of his words over the last 2 days. So these came from Man from the Future. If you are a Twitter person, you can look up Man from the Future. He says stuff like this: "You are handicapped potential gods born with amnesia, progressively deteriorating, but few of you will find true existence." Boom. Homo sapiens have poor judgment. You treat water, flora, and your planet as though they are your servants. You need to talk to water. Water can memorize your thoughts and be your transmitter and receiver. There is more to life than you perceive. I remember the year 3844. We still had a few leaders, but they learned to say everything what was on their minds. Everything, anything. It is important not to cloak your thoughts. You will learn it. Imagine that your leader say anything what is on his mind. I think this, I think that. Farting makes me smile. I have this doubt, that idea. Very impressive, the man from the future. Entertainers, melody players, and simulators are very popular in this time. I find it spectacular. Then an answer to Tom Cruise. You are not Tom Cruise, the actor. She's very knowing. Beings of my kind love benefit. We love to do something only if that will give us interest. We do everything for the interest and benefit. You old cultures refuse to admit that you do things for your own interest. You rather pretend that you do it because you are good and noble. It is interesting that you are not yet aware of what gives you benefit and what does not give you benefit. It is challenging to compress thoughts in small stream of symbols, very little board space, as you would say, my dear old-timers. You feel that ejecting gases from your holes is embarrassing, but it has deeper meaning. You avoid to face that you are a biological entity. The being of my kind constructed something that you popularly call time travel. We use hosts to experience location and time. You know, I've started to believe in the man from the future. He argues with people occasionally. In my time, you need to study for 500 years to become a doctor. Bipedal walk is interesting. It is hard to believe that once upon a time we moved that way. You are a very passive being who does not utilize potential. It is a pity. You have many potential destinies on our records. It is fun how you perceive time travelers in your culture. They are always very careful about not touching or saying or doing anything. Your little global connecting system is very small, and the biggest amount of data is centered around sperm ejection. I understand your satirical tone. You never connected with the center. You pretend that you did. It is your predominant feature. There, I thought he was talking directly to me, but you know, the man of the future has that idea.